Hello, Michael here from Small Robot Studio with another Renderman 23 tutorial. Today we're going to be having a look at some basic render settings and the IT previewer. So to begin with, on your Renderman 23 shelf, we've got the IPR button here. This is Interactive Preview Render, and that will bring up your IT previewer. So you can see my scene has rendered here. We can stop that and we'll bring up our options for a second here, our render settings. We'll go to the AOV tab and click the beauty layer, and then we'll just click denoise. Now what you're seeing here is the beauty layer. When you render this out, it actually has got a couple of other things in it if you're rendering as a batch render, but I cover batch rendering in a separate tutorial, and AOVs for that matter as well. So we can do a couple of things with this. Once we've enabled the denoising for beauty renders, we can hit the N button and that will show the denoise version, which will clean up all these noisy areas as best as it can. Now the denoiser that we use on the IT previewer is slightly different to the one that's used in batch render, so this is only going to give you an indication of what denoising may be able to do, but don't take it as gospel as to what is actually going to be happened in your final render. If you want to see that, I would recommend batch rendering a single frame if you're going to be batch rendering a whole lot of frames. If we take another IPR, it'll update our scene. Something we can also do is go to window and we can split image. So on the right hand side with that selected, I can click my first render, and then on the left hand side I could click either my first or my second render, and then this way we can compare the rendering of either one. And this is good if you've changed the lights or the materials on something, or if you've changed your render sampling and you want to check the difference in noise that each one has. Another handy couple of keys that you can use here as hotkeys are A, S, D, F, and G and H. So you can see down the bottom there, they're actually running through your RGB, and then your alpha, which at the moment won't be able to display properly, and then your luminance. The one that I always use is luminance because it's really good for checking your light values. When you've got all the colors on, it can be sometimes difficult to tell whether your values are good and whether you're getting good contrast between your foreground and background, say. So now by enabling this, I can see that my sphere is being lit nicely on the top and it's creating good separation to the background midtones. Now if you're happy with this image and you wanted to save out, say, the denoised version, what we can do is click catalog and burn in mapping on save, and what this will do will give you the screen space color version of your image. Otherwise it will give you a linear color version of it, and if you don't know what that means, don't worry about it too much. I will cover it in a separate tutorial about linear workflow, but for now all that's important is if you're happy with the way that it looks here, and you want it to look the same in a different photo editing program, you can burn in mapping on save, and then we can click file and export file. This is what you would do if you were just rendering out a single frame and you weren't going to do any further compositing. You were just doing it all in the render engine, or you just wanted to save it out just as a quick reference for some other something else. Otherwise, normally your workflow would be to batch render even on a single image. Now let's have a look at some of our render settings. The first page you'll see under Renderman is sampling. Sampling dictates the amount of time Renderman is going to take to render each pixel. So at the moment on IPR it will render up to a maximum of 64 samples. So the IPR is what we're seeing here. Otherwise you've got the lobe above, which is the final render. So this is what samples you would use if you're using a final render or a batch render. Incremental is whether or not it will render the buckets, which are kind of difficult to see, but if I click IPR, those little squares as they sort of come out, those are the individual buckets. So if I go to do a final render and turn incremental off, and I'll just make this a lower sample rate for the sake of the video, you'll see that the individual buckets appear, and so all it is doing is rendering each bucket or each square to the maximum sample rate before moving on to the next one. Whereas with incremental, it will render the entire screen space out progressively until it does the entire image. Something that can also be noted about your buckets is that you can actually change the size of them, which can be useful for decreasing your render time. It doesn't have a massive effect, but if you increase, say, to 64 by 64, and we do another IPR, sometimes it can make your images sample a little bit quicker. We're talking seconds here, so this is the sort of thing you want to look at when you're doing animation. I cover this a little bit more in the upcoming tutorial about render optimization, so look for that a little bit later in the week. Going back to sampling, you can see that in the final render area we've got minimum samples and maximum samples. And what Renderman does is it looks at a pixel and it tries to decide whether or not it is noisy or not, and so sometimes it will sample it all the way up to the maximum of 32 samples, and sometimes it will just sample it a little bit less, maybe 10 or 16 or something like that, depending on what the image is like. So if it sees that the area around it is not very noisy, it just assumes that it's done and it moves on and spends more of its render time on areas that are noisy, like shadows and things like that. And you can see that in here. Shadows are the areas that are pretty noisy, whereas the background, maybe not so much. Pixel variance is how fine a detail Renderman will look sort of to remove noise. So at a lower value, it's going to spend more time on each pixel trying to get it to be a cleaner looking render overall. So if you actually increase this to say 0.05, you may be happy with the noise, that it will actually generate more noise in this case, but it will render faster. Again, I cover this in optimization, so I'm not going to go too deep into it. I would say by default 0.01 is okay until you start to optimize. IPR samples work in the same way, but it doesn't have the minimum sample rate because it will always just continue rendering up until 64 samples, or until you move the camera or something like that or make a change. So we'll move down to the path tracer parameters. I'm not going to go over integrators here. I think that will be worth doing in a separate tutorial. Max light bounces is how many times the light is bounced and path traced before it's terminated. So for example, if we have one indirect bounce and do a render, you will see maybe a small amount of difference here. So you can see that the area in the shadow is a little bit darker, and that's because what's happening is our light above is shining a ray down, it's hitting the ground, bouncing once, hitting the object, and then coming to the camera. It actually works in reverse, but it's kind of easier to think of it that way. So it gets one indirect bounce before it goes to the light. So it's illuminating a second surface based on its first surface. That's why you'll see a little bit of pink there in the surface of this green sphere. It's because it's receiving a bounced light ray from the ground. If we set that to 0, however, you'll notice that there's only direct lighting. So now the light can't bounce off the ground and hit the sphere because it can only bounce, it can only have a direct bounce, which is just to a surface and then to the camera. This can speed up your render time as well. Usually something around 3 to 4 or more is fine for max indirect bounces. The lower you go, you'll also notice your scene starts to get a little bit darker, but I cover this in optimization as well. Russian roulette and indirect clamping I won't cover because they're sort of more advanced, and I think I'll probably do a more advanced tutorial on rendering where you might want to use those for optimization. I think to keep things simple, we'll just continue on to default ray depth. And if we set our max diffuse ray depth to 1, and by default I believe specular depth is 4, you're not going to see much difference here because all we're dealing with in this scene at the moment is a diffuse sphere. It does have actually a small amount of specularity on it, but not enough to really see a difference here. So even if we go back to our previous one, you'll see not a huge amount of difference there. And with diffuse max depth, you're not actually going to see that much difference with most diffuse objects, as light can't actually be transmitted through them most of the time, unless you have a translucent diffuse object like something that's got subsurface scattering, but you're going to use a value of 1 on your max diffuse depth and that will be fine. Max specular depth, on the other hand, can actually be quite useful. So let's bring in a little bit more geometry. So what I've got here in the scene now is our original green ball. I've also got a reflective dodecahedron, and I've got this tetrahedron here, which is actually made of glass. So light will actually be transmitted through that. If I move that a little bit to the left, you might be able to see the sphere behind it. So you can see that sphere is actually coming through there. If I reduce the specular depth down to 1 and run that IPR again, you'll see that none of the light has been transmitted through it, and that's because it needs more than one bounce to get through the two surfaces that it's going to hit and then to the surface behind it. So even if we increase this to 2, you'll see that it still doesn't see the sphere behind it. We need to have 3 light bounces to get all the way through both surfaces and then hit the sphere. This is also true for reflective surfaces, so if we had a number of mirrors, after a point it would actually terminate the light, and you would actually not be able to see geometry that is being reflected. One other thing worth noting is if you look at the most recent render, which has got a spec depth of 4, and the previous one, you'll see that the area that is in the transmitted area is actually not sampled as nicely. It's not getting those secondary rays from the ground as nicely, and we're not seeing as much detail. Obviously this isn't being rendered up as high, but you can see just in the value there that it is making a bit of a difference. Now, if you were just dealing with diffused objects, you may not even need that much specular depth, and you could save some render time, so that's worth keeping in mind as well. The final simple thing that you'll usually deal with when you're doing your renders will be under the Common tab. The 2 things that we'll really look at here, or the 3 things, are the frame range. If you're rendering an animation, you'll want to have that set to animation. I cover batch animation in the tutorial I'm bringing out later in the week though, so look out for that. And renderable cameras, which is really important to have the correct camera selected for what you're going to be rendering. So if you've created a new camera, you'll want to select it here for your final renders, if you're batch rendering especially. The last thing is your resolution of your image. So you want to make sure that it's set to the correct resolution. If you were doing a full HD, you'd obviously want to set it to 1080. For this for this tutorial, I've just had it set to HD 540, and you can set it to custom widths and heights as well. So now, if I'm happy with everything that I've done here, I can do a final render in the It preview or as a batch render. So I'll do a final render with the final render button here. Okay, so now we know that we have rendered our scene up to 32 samples. Our minimum samples, actually worth noting, is set to 0. This is actually going to be the square root of 32 in this case when you set it to 0. Otherwise, you'd have to set it to a custom number to make sure it's rendering between, say, 4 samples and 32. If you want to set it higher, you can also do that. With our render complete, we can look at the render time using the I key on the keyboard, and that will show that it took 49 seconds to render that out to that. And that pretty much covers all the basic render settings to get you started using Renderman. That's it for this tutorial. If you found it useful, make sure you leave a like so other people can find it. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, as we're bringing out CG and illustration tutorials every week, just like this one. Become a patron and access tutorial assets, bonus content, a private Discord, and more by clicking the link below.